Yo, 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 it's X. Welcome to What's Out Media. Today, we got my guy Pranav from Amazing HQ. Today, we have a collab with Amazing HQ. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you doing, Xavier?
Doing well, doing well. So, for those of the guys, for those of the people who don't know Amazing HQ, how would you describe it, Pranav?
It's a media outlet dedicated to providing a platform to Asian American athletes to help better represent our community, accurately portray our stories, help to eradicate some of those misinformed stereotypes, and to provide inspiration for that next generation of Asian American athletes.
That's amazing. So, Pranav, how about yourself? Were you an athlete?
Yeah, so I'm Indian American. I played football throughout my life. I played at the college level as well, and it's kind of there where I realized like, yeah, there's really not many of us, and for the few of us that make it out to those levels, oftentimes their stories are never told. And so like for me, I always felt like I was the one person on this journey. It was very hard for me to find other people to relate to. But as I progressed in my journey, I slowly started hearing stories about a lot of these trailblazers and a lot of people that came before me. But I think it takes a lot of deep digging to find those stories. Um, so for me, I kind of realized like, oh, if I knew about some of these stories before, that would have had a huge impact on not only my journey, but also so many of my peers' journeys. Because I had a ton of peers that were so much more talented than me. But whether it be because of their family, their friends, their community, or society telling them that this is not meant for them, they kind of like lost their dreams early on. So I kind of created this for that reason specifically.
Nice. So when did you or where did you grow up?
So I grew up in the Bay Area. I grew up in the city called Cupertino. Basically, it's the place where if you have an iPhone, it'll be on your maps because that's where Apple's headquarters is. I mean, on your weather app. But yeah, so I grew up there. It's a not it's in Silicon Valley, and it's a large immigrant population. So it's basically like primarily like Asian immigrants from Asia and their children coming to work in tech and other fields. So for me, like I went to a very like high academic public school that didn't really have any focus in sports. So it was hard to kind of like I was from the age of 8. I had the dream of making to the NFL, and I was ridiculed all along the way, just kind of being this skinny Indian dude.
Right.
Um, so so there was a lot to kind of like it was definitely a lot of self perseverance, but it was also I think the fact that the culture of sports in Asia is so much different than it is here, and the knowledge of like, oh, this is a viable path that you can do both at the same time. You can do school, you can do sports at the same time. I think that part was there was a lack of understanding. There was a lack of like, oh, there's proof in the pudding, whereas like there's so much proof in the pudding in other fields that we've had success in from our community.
Right. So, what was the makeup of your football team in high school, or throughout? When did you start playing it? When did you start playing?
Yeah, I mean, so I fell in love with the sport in like when I was 8. Um, Randomly, it's a super random reason. I was doing this book report project. Somehow I ended up deciding to like I was going through the library, found a book about like Brett Favre. I don't know why him out of all people. I randomly picked it up, and then I was like, oh, this sport's kind of cool. So then I started playing after that. It's interesting because like for Pop Warner, which is like the kind of like youth football program, we didn't really have any feeder programs like in our area. So I had to kind of travel out a little bit to another city to play. Um, and that's like the first time I like realized like, yeah, there's like I was like one of two Asian people on the team, even at the sixth grade level.
Wow.
Um, and but yeah, like with my high school being like 80% like Asian American, it was interesting. Like even like it was there was a couple years where even like half our team was less than half of the team was Asian,
Wow.
whereas like when it's so different than the student body population. But um, it was definitely like every time like we kind of went against opponents from different areas. Obviously, we were looked at different ways. When I was like on recruiting trips, I was called like different things. I know I was like called like Slumdog Millionaire before, because it's like first of all, it's like I think we're seeing it more now, but like I think back then it was like um saying those kind of like backhanded comments towards like Asian Americans was like it was more of like it was seen as like a joking thing. It was seen as nothing with a real negative context. And a lot of that is because there was never like retaliation back, right? It was just, a lot of times we were laughing with them, right? Because that's the only way we knew how to be accepted. So there's definitely experiences with that, and it's like being like one of the few to kind of like represent the community at whatever level I was at. It was kind of like there was only so much leeway you had to you have to kind of like assimilate to a culture a little bit.
So let's talk about in your culture. So football is not prevalent, right? It's not the biggest thing. How did your family react to you, being drawn to such a unique sport in your culture?
Yeah, I think a lot of it definitely started off as confusion, right? Because it's just like a little like like a pretext is kind of like in a lot of these big Asian countries, for example, like with me specifically would be India, right? Where my parents are from. It's like if you want to pursue sports, you kind of are like funneled into a path from like really early childhood. And it's like you're on a path to try to become like someone on the national team. That's kind of like what it is. And if you're not, then you're just going like you're going straight into the books the whole time. Like you're all about school. There's no really like um, symbiosis at all between the two. So it's kind of like you either know one path or you know the other path. You don't know that they can exist together. So and obviously the fact that football doesn't really exist in India. There's that too. I think for me, it was more so, or me and like so many other immigrant parents, Asian American or not. I think the big thing is like a lot of these people, a lot of our parents came to this country, like, right, there's the saying, came to our country with $5 in our pocket. And in most cases, it's actually like, that's literally true, right?
Right.
And you kind of like, they kind of work up from there. They come here for a reason to what? To like provide their kids a better opportunity. And how are we living out that better opportunity if we're trying to pursue a game, right?
Right.
That's how it's seen.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of that where it's like sometimes it can be like disappointment. It's like did I really sacrifice all of this to like come here for that? And like with me, like I grew up in like a single mother household, so it's like she was kind of my mom did like so much, she sacrificed so much. She never really got to live her life until kind of like more recently now that we're like both her kids are out of college.
Yeah.
So I think from that perspective, a lot of people would be able to understand like that's the reason why it's like very hesitant. But I think for me, like over time, I definitely like had to like rebel a lot, had to like find a lot of reasons to like get through things. Sometimes I had to lie, even though that was not necessarily the best way to do it. Um, but I think over time, like my mom started to realize, and my mom started first to realize that it was important to me. Second, realize that like, oh, there is like you can do both at the same time. Um, you can be happy, like you can be happy and all like happy pursuing one thing. You can also like pursue something more professional on the academic side. So I think it definitely took some time for sure.
Interesting. So what support did you have? Was it just yourself? Were there teammates that encouraged you along the way? What was it?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think definitely the biggest thing was like the internal support for myself. I think it was more so like a kind of like a delusional level of support to an extent. If you think about like where I come from and like where like the fact that like there is no one like I don't know one person to play college football like from my high school. I've only like there was someone who came from like 2010 or something, which is like or even I think he graduated 28 from our high school 2008 from our high school, and I never obviously never got to meet him, but it's like something that like, you don't see it. So it's like why would I even like try to attempt something like this?
Right.
But um, so for me, it was definitely that was definitely the biggest thing. I think I definitely did have support from my friends, and I think as time grew on, and I definitely got more support from my peers, where it's just like, oh, like he's doing something really different, and that's really cool. People were attracted a little bit more to that, where it's like, um, I don't know, he's kind of like representing our community in a little sense. So I think that part was super meaningful to me, that I was able to have the opportunity. I definitely would say like one of the people who kind of like proved to me that it was true, was, so there's this guy named Varun Ram. I first heard about him when I was in ninth grade. And he's one of my cousin's family friends. So my cousin's from Maryland. And he's this dude, he's this 5'9" guy. He's about probably like 6 years older than me or something. He was a walk-on at University of Maryland. And he ended up becoming a scholarship player there, in basketball. He had like one of the most like underdog journeys, like no offers anywhere. He went to prep school, no offers there, played Division III, no offers. Ended up just going to Maryland, not even know if he was gonna have a tryout opportunity. Got a tryout opportunity, got a position, got a scholarship, started a game, and then even had like the game-winning block in the NCAA tournament.
That's dope. That's
And
dope.
he's a 5'9" Indian dude, right? That no one believed in. So I had the opportunity to talk to him when I was a junior in high school, and he kind of like really like, that was like one of the first people I was like, wow, like my story's like, obviously I knew I was never had the same like athletic potential that he did.
Yeah.
But I knew that like, wow, like I can relate to someone's story now.
And this is possible.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. It
So,
kind of brought reality to it. So, I mean, yeah, you might have felt that you were, you know, reaching for the stars or something like that. But with someone to have an experience like that, that's an amazing story.
exactly.
Shout him out again. I would like, let's get a shout out for him again. So that's amazing. That's great to hear. So how was the recruiting process?
So for me, a lot of the recruiting process was kind of like, I had to like do the reaching out, right? Because no one's gonna hear about Monte Vista High School, which is where I went to high school.
Yeah.
So I kind of like just reached out to a bunch of random schools, at the Division III level. And for me, like my first interest that I got was from like Claremont McKenna, which is like a school in Southern California, like high academic school.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting enough. That's like my mom is like, oh, like you can maybe get into a school that you couldn't get into, and because of football. So that's like when she was like, oh, like I'll take you to these camps and stuff. So that was a cool opportunity. I went to a bunch of camps. Went to like a Pomona Pitzer camp, and I ended up going to Chapman University, which is also a Southern California university. And that was also like a lot of like me kind of like persisting, right? Because like no matter like regardless of like what film I show, it's like the film I'm showing is at like oftentimes it's gonna be like a competition is not the same as a lot of these players that play the Division III level, they usually come from a lot of these powerhouse schools. They're just not the best players, right? So they come from like the Bishop Gormans, they come from all those schools. So they've played alongside that type of that Division I caliber and future NFL caliber competition their entire lives. And so I ended up deciding to play there, small school in Orange County. And yeah.
And how was your experience there?
Yeah, so it was definitely a ride. I think the first year was the most fun for me. And I think, like I was saying, like how I came from from a school or like an area where there's not a lot of football talent. Like I had really definitely had a lot of concerns. As like I felt like I was gonna be the worst. Like out of everyone on the roster, I'm probably gonna be the worst person. And luckily, like I mean, not luckily, but like gratefully, I was able to like compete like with a lot of these players. And like my freshman year, I got a lot more playing time than I expected to. And my defensive back coach, he definitely liked me a lot then. It's interesting. They like I ended up becoming like known as this like one of the biggest hitters on our team, and it's definitely really surprising because I was still this skinny Indian dude, and I was kind of like shocking a lot of people in that sense. And they like, for some reason, they call me like the Sri Lankan assassin. I'm not even Sri Lankan, but I was like, all right, I'll go with it. I'm sure there's some level of racism in there, but it's all good.
I was going to ask you a question on that. And it seems like when you're a minority, especially in a sport that doesn't have a lot of minority, I'm not saying that it does in football, but you know, if you're an outcast in a way, you low-key become a celebrity. And and usually, like for me, I was this black kid rowing.
Yeah.
It's one of the whitest sports. And I'm Big X, or I'm X. What's up? Like, so no, it's kind of funny to hear that. Like, there's some similarity in that way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like it's an interesting thing too, because like at the Division III level, like obviously when you see the NFL, right, it's a predominantly black league, right? But when you see Division III football, it's not like that. It's a predominantly white sport in Division III football, and it's like we do have a decent amount of like Latinos, especially just being in Orange County. We have like a few like African Americans on our team, and interesting enough, like I think we probably had like one of the more like Asian American populated teams in the country. We have, I mean, which is not a lot. First of all, we had like five Asian Americans on our team and a team like of 100.
Yeah.
But I think to me that was like, and because a lot of them played my position too. So I remember the first day like of camp, like before like of summer camp, I like saw like, I saw like a bunch of the players doing a drill, and I was like, and in one row, like there was like 3 Asian Americans doing the drill. I was like, hold up, that's really cool. So interesting enough, I'm sure like you probably can relate to it, but it's like these are the people that I ended up like finding the biggest connection to, where it's like I can relate to their journeys, they can relate to my journeys. Like obviously it depends, but in this case, like we were able to relate on our upbringings as well, and I think that helped. So it was definitely I was definitely grateful to have like those people around me, to like it's like a sign of feeling of comfort. But also on the other side, it was interesting where it's like, because like how I said, I came from a city that was just, like predominantly Asian American, right? And of that Asian American, half of it was like Indian. So I grew up around 50% Indian people my entire life. Coming to Orange County, first of all, I'm not sure if you know about Orange County, but it's like it's like a red bubble, which is like very different than the rest of California for me. And second, it's also like for so many of my teammates, I was not only their first Indian teammate they've ever had, sometimes I was the first Indian person they've ever met. And that didn't like register in my brain like correctly, right? So in that sense, it's like you become like the stereotype, and whether it's really like that could be a good stereotype, that could be a bad stereotype. It's just how you portray yourself, because there is no other understanding they have of the community other than like Apu from The Simpsons, right, or something like that,
right?
Which is obviously like not the greatest, but but it kind of like gave me the opportunity to like educate a lot of people, and I felt like that was a great opportunity, but also at the same time I definitely like felt like some sort of distance from a lot of my teammates, where there was a disconnect, and it was hard to like bridge that gap a little.
I feel the same way in a lot of ways. Not saying that my teammates were that way, but I could definitely see when I was breaking barriers for them, when I was breaking, stereotypes for them. They're like, what? And I always enjoyed that, because I'm like, yeah, like, we're all people. Like, you got to kind of keep it at that. Like, I mean, I know how simple that sounds, but seriously, and it's funny seeing it, especially if they're, they're okay with that. Like, they're not like, it's not in a bad way. It was kind of like they were just ignorant to it. You get what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. We gotta realize that like we all have our like implicit biases from wherever we grow up, right? Whether that could be implicit bias for our own community, or could that be implicit bias for other communities, right? And it's like we got to understand that like our thinking is not going to be the same as someone else from another part of, or just even from the same community in some cases, right? So it's all about like kind of like understanding that, and like realizing that like maybe some things that people say aren't like meant with the intention that you might think it is, something like
right.
that. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, that's what I learned too, in college, just learning that, like, it's just because they're really curious. They don't know. They don't have any ill will behind it. My question to you is, so when you were at Chapman, did you did you mentor any other athletes that, may have been Asian American looking into, football or basketball before we even talk about Amazing? I'm just saying, like, and in that aspect.
I definitely not like in Chapman, but there were definitely some athletes back home that were like, oh wow, like this guy is like playing college football, and like randomly, like when I used to come back, that like there were people who like knew who I was, and I'm like, how do you know? How do you know who I am? Like, so that was like cool in one part, but it's also like, yeah, like you can kind of have the opportunity to like have like tangible impact. And obviously a lot of these people, not necessarily all these people wanted to like play sports at the next level,
Right.
but I think it definitely helped even in their high school journeys, per se. um but um I think like definitely from that. But yeah.
So how was the transition out of college?
Yeah. Well, the transition out of college for me, it was interesting. So I ended up playing 3 years of football. So I didn't play my senior year.
Okay.
And that kind of gave me the opportunity to do a lot of other like professional or like things that I wanted to do professionally. Because I'm sure like when you're playing college sport, it's not just like you're playing during the season. And it's even at the Division 3 level, it's like it's the entire year.
And
And
especially
that's
for football, it's like meetings. All my friends are in football. I got meetings. I got this. I'm like, yo, I got a few meetings a week, and I complain about them, but
it's
it's
like
a whole nother level.
it's like because there's so much like of a study into football too, right? It's not just like get bigger, get stronger, get faster, learn all the technique. It's like how do you use your brain? And I think people outside the sport don't realize that, where it's like, oh, there's just 10, 11 people just running at each other. That's there's that kind of stereotype, right? But it's a lot
Yeah.
more than that. um, but yeah, so I ended up like, so what I did in college, I was a double major in broadcast journalism and kinesiology. Um, and I wasn't really too sure about which path I wanted to go down. But then later on in my career, or later on in college, I realized I wanted to go down the journalism route. So I ended up getting to do some internship opportunities when I wouldn't have been able to otherwise, during football and stuff. Um, and and then after that, I realized. So I interned at a couple places. I interned at Spectrum Sportsnet, which was like the Lakers Dodgers broadcast network, and then
Yeah.
interned at Fox Sports Digital. After that, and then going to my last semester, my senior year, I only had like 2 classes left, and I was in the process of applying for internships, and I was like, should I do like another internship, or should I, or like what I realized was like, oh, this is like the one time in my life potentially that I could like do something like freewheeling, where it's like I could pursue something that like I wouldn't have the opportunity to pursue it when I start working, right? Because um, I'm sure like the time is just not there.
Right.
The priorities are not there because you're obviously like your job is at stake in like in some cases, right? Um, so I ended up like, oh, I guess a little backtext to that. During that fall of 2019, I did a couple stories on. One was about like the Asian American football community, and they were kind of like long form written stories. Another about the rise of Asian American basketball. And those I got to like interview like dozens of people from the community, some like really high up there in the community, and some that are like really trailblazing a path for us. Um, and from that, I realized that like even when I was interviewing a lot of these high name people, um, it's like everyone told me the same thing, that like they wish people had asked them this before. Like they were at this level, but no one had asked them like about this. Like they were so passionate about like sharing their story about like what it is to be an Asian American athlete, what it is to like represent for the community. But their stories just like were never told. And I was like, and then I thought to myself, I was like, yeah, there's like a big gap in coverage here. And that kind of like needs to be resolved. Um, so that was like my idea. I was like, why not like create something to like help that. And it's like I think my thinking was like, everyone's going to know who Jeremy Lin is. Everyone's going to know who Chloe Kim is. Everyone's going to know who Suni Lee is. But no one knows everyone else under that, right? Because
Right.
I don't know if you know that there was like a survey that was going around like a year or two ago where like people were being asked like, what Asian Americans do you know? No one can name anyone, like just random people on the street. No one can name anyone other than like Jeremy Lin, Jackie Chan, and that was like basically it. Uh,
Wow.
but it's like there's so many other trailblazers. There's so many other people currently that are like right under that like celebrity tier level, right? Whatever, or who are not necessarily at the highest level, but those are the stories that can really inspire people. Like for
Right.
me, like in my case, it was Varun Ram, right? Um, Telling those types of stories, that's the biggest thing. And I felt like we didn't do that as a community like well enough. Not just as a community, as a society, because it's not just Asian American jobs to tell the stories of our community. Um, so I ended up deciding to like start that, not knowing anything about how to start a media outlet, how to do all of that. Um, but that's kind of like the inception of it.
Nice, nice, nice. So I mean, that's a perfect transition. So to amazing. Yeah. So how did it start out? How'd you start it up? How'd you do it? What were the first steps? If you did how to, what did you do with the book for dummies? What did you do?
The thing is, there was no roadmap built before this. That's the biggest thing. So I really didn't really have much to go off of. And for me, like I remember I was like randomly at a ramen restaurant with my boy Matt, and I was like, should I do this? And then I was like, I'm only gonna do this if you like give me like a hard yes, because I'm like a very indecisive person, so I can never really make decisions. And then he was like, yeah, like you're doing this. So I call him, like I jokingly call him like a co-founder, because like
Yeah.
without that word, right, I wouldn't have started this.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but but yeah, I ended up just like my initial investment to it was like buying a camera, like creating a website, all that stuff. I really didn't have much knowledge about like cameras. First of all, I didn't have much knowledge. I had no knowledge about how to build a website, no knowledge how to like run a media outlet, no knowledge about like social media. Um, and it's all honestly, it's a lot of just like learning on the go, right? And I kind of just started it off by like I started in December 2019. That's like the peak of like high school basketball season. And
Yeah.
being in Southern California, where that's like, I'd say that's the biggest hub of Asian American basketball talent.
Right.
Um, I was able to like, just like I had some connections like in the Asian American space already. And I obviously like being passionate about the community, I was following a lot of these athletes in general. So I knew a decent amount of them. But I kind of
Okay.
just started off by like that. The first athlete that we actually featured was this guy named Yuki Okubo. He was this dude who became like a viral sensation at his freshman year. He played
Mhm.
with the O'Neal brothers at Crossroads High School, like
Okay.
O'Neal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and he was another example. He's this really short dude. He's like 5'7", but he was fearless. And he was playing against like these like high major Division I players. Um, and I think obviously that's like something that's like a lot of people can relate to. It's like he's not, for example, like you know how like Yao Ming 7'6", it's like he's a big person for the Asian community, right? But
Right.
in terms of relatability, there's zero of that, where no one can
No, no
relate.
whatsoever. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so we started out. That was our first little feature, and then we kind of went from there, just like going around like the rest of the high school season, finding a bunch of these different athletes, connecting with these athletes who like recommend us to other athletes, doing a lot of internal research on our own, and also like connecting with a lot of the leaders in the Asian American basketball space, whether it be the trainers, the coaches, some of like the founders of like the Asian American basketball movement, things like that, back in like the days where like they literally couldn't play in other leagues because of like
Let's
internal
talk about.
before
Yeah,
that.
let's talk about that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're putting me on the game, so I have no idea. You
Yeah, so
tell
that's
me.
that's like one of the biggest things I learned from doing that Rise of Asian American Basketball story I did before starting this, where it's like when it comes to like Asian American basketball specifically, but also for like other sports like baseball, volleyball, there's a lot of like history within the community, and with a lot of the early immigration to America from Asians coming in San Francisco, coming in LA, right?
Yeah.
Um, there were like Asian American basketball leagues, and a lot of them were like a lot of them started with, so it's like Japanese American leagues, and then later on like Chinese American leagues, where they were started because like they couldn't get into other gyms, they couldn't play with others, and it was also like some of it started pre-internment camp day, some of it was like after internment camp, but um, it ended up, I think the interesting part about it now is like there's less there, the like the hub for like like a Japantown or like a Chinatown, like the community, because like before it was like everyone like had to live in the same area because just that's literally how it worked. They weren't
Right.
able to live in other places, right? Like
Yeah.
with red lighting and stuff like that. Um, but now obviously like because that's like, oh, because that doesn't exist anymore, there's a lot of like mass like migration outside, right?
Yeah.
So the basketball league is actually like one of the few ways that like Japanese American culture, Chinese American culture like exists through like its people. And I think that part is super interesting, where it's like obviously like the type of discrimination they face isn't like anywhere near it is today, but it's more, these leagues are more so used as a way to like preserve that culture, like teach about the roots, um and be able to serve as like a form of community where it's like, oh, these people are all coming together, and it's like it becomes like a part of like your childhood. So I think that part was like so interesting to me. um and you see it too, like even in the like even in like in NorCal, like in the Sacramento area, they have like Punjabi leagues,
Yeah.
um and obviously there's so much Punjabi American basketball talent, but I think it's really cool that they're all able to like come together to form community through that. And I think that's like the power of sports, right? Where you have that opportunity. So I think there's a lot of like amazing history through that. A lot of great players have come through those leagues, and I think on the women's side too, you see it now where there's somewhat of a pipeline in Southern California where it's like there are people from these specific leagues that end up going through this Division I funnel. And I think that's like awesome to see that we're like seeing that now.
That's really good to hear. That's really good to hear. Yeah, no, let's talk about how big the sport of basketball is, in Asia.
Mhm.
We were just talking about this, basketball being such a connection. Legitimately, I made so many friends, and they were legitimately from China, in college, just playing pickup, and they were hoopers.
Yeah.
Like they were hooping better than our squad at the time, and you talking about a D1 program. And I mean, I always had so much fun. I mean, we would run fives, we run threes, and we'd run for hours. At one point, they ended up, they invited me over, man. They're teaching me all about their culture, and it's all based off of playing, some pickup.
Yeah.
It's an amazing experience. But
What
yeah,
college did you go to?
say it again.
What college did you go to?
I went to Jacksonville University in Jacksonville, Florida.
Nice.
But yeah, let's talk about how big it is. Yeah, I don't think people really grasp how big basketball is in Asia.
Yeah, and especially if you just looking about the numbers and like you go to China specifically, there's 400 million people that play basketball in China. And think about the American population. Like
Yeah,
that's bigger than the American population. So if you think about like what's the biggest country, that's like the biggest like central of like basketball. It's not America technically, right?
yeah.
Um, um, but yeah, it's grown so much, and I think if you ever meet like a Filipino person, like that's like I think that's the biggest basketball crazy like country, and not even just country, like Filipino Americans too. So it's like just the community, like they love like that community loves basketball so much more than like anything, and like you can
I
see it.
know because they get like they have. I've met a lot. I know a lot of Filipinos. Of they have a lot of freaking like jerseys from role players that I don't even know, and they're like, "You don't know this guy?" And I go, "No, I don't know this guy."
Exactly, and it's like the way they kind of like idolize Kobe. It's like I think when you think about Kobe and you like think about the Mamba mentality, you think about like all the people he's impacted. Like I did this story last year about like Kobe's impact on the Asian community, and I don't think a lot of people like think about that, right? Because like why would you think about Kobe Asian, right?
Right.
He's not Jeremy Lin. He's not like Asian American. Like why would he impact us, right? But he's like I think like it's like him, Kobe, Jeremy Lin, and Kobe, Jeremy Lin, Yao Ming, and Michael Jordan. Those are like the biggest influences on like the Asian community in
Wow.
terms of basketball. And I think Kobe, the biggest thing for him was like he had a very universal message and universal like way of living life. It was like that Mamba mentality. It didn't even have to apply to sports, right? Like I think that's the biggest thing when it's like I have so many friends that work in the engineering side of things or like in medical field, but they like really idolize like the way of life of Kobe and kind of like I think that's like super interesting where it's like for my community, right? Like where sports weren't a big thing, everyone was a huge Kobe fan. Everyone like always talked about him, and it didn't necessarily even have to be in the basketball context. So I think that's a really cool like takeaway from that. Um, but yeah, like basketball has like grown so much in Asia, and it's continuing to grow. Obviously, I think like it kind of like started like booming from like the Michael Jordan years, but especially more so now. And I think NBA especially is like doing a great job of like helping to globalize it. By like I think couple years ago they had the first preseason game played in India. That's like a big thing. I think like India is kind of like behind a lot of the other countries in terms of basketball, but if you think about it too, right, 1.3 billion people and growing, it's like they're going to like, I think it's probably one of the fastest growing sports out in India. So there's a lot of potential there.
Remember about like I want to say maybe this documentary is a little dated now, but it was talking about like NBA India and how they were developing athletes and stuff like that. I don't know how it's progressing now, but do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I think it's like through like the NBA Global Academy. They definitely do a great job of that. Like a lot of these athletes like come over to the States too. And like you see a lot of them play like IMG places like that. Like last year there was a dude on the G League Ignite. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're definitely the tough part is like it's hard. I think it's all about infrastructure. That's the biggest thing. Like like it's definitely changing a lot, but it's like you just need more basketball courts first of all, right?
Right.
Where it's like I think for like when my parents were growing up, like I asked my mom like recently, it was like so like how often do you see a basketball court? And it's like kind of like never for her. So it's like I mean like if you don't have that, right, it's hard to get that start.
Without a
So I
doubt.
think the tough part about like why you see a lot of these Indian players who like come over here who like and their talent doesn't necessarily transfer. It's because like these are players that are getting like handpicked like when they're a teenager or something, and then they're like, okay, let's start playing basketball now, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's a lot tougher where it's like they go for the physical first, and then they're like, okay, let's try and make him into a basketball player. Because it's not like not a lot of these people are playing from like when they're like 5 years old or like when they're 3 years old. So I think like once that starts happening, that's going to cause for a lot of change. But the passion is there for sure.
Nice, nice, nice. Okay, let's talk about some more. Let's dig into amazing.
Yeah.
What are some notable athletes coming out of high school this year, and what are some not notable college athletes as well? I would love to hear maybe a list of five, maybe 10, or maybe give some descriptions of them as well. I mean, I would love to hear. I would love to just showcase some athletes.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot. So I talking about like basketball specifically.
Basketball or football or soccer, whatever sport. I mean, honestly, I'm game for all of it.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's start. I think it's starting football because that list is a little bit shorter, so we can like.
Okay,
I think I can think of more specific people.
got
Uh,
you.
I think for football, like I did a little thing about them earlier, but it's like Notre Dame has a lot of talent, a lot of Asian American talent, and like this year in the draft, they have a safety coming out. He's projected top 10, top 10 pick. I think is probably gonna be like one of the highest drafted safeties in a while.
Wow.
Um, Kyle Hamilton, and he's like half Korean, half black, and um, I think the interesting part is like Notre Dame's head coach now, Marcus Freeman. He's also half Korean.
Wow.
Um, Notre Dame's like star, like future, like phenom quarterback, Tyler Buckner is half Korean.
Wow. I
He was
didn't
like,
know.
yeah, he's like, if you like look at his high school stats, it's like one of the most ridiculous things ever. Like his junior year of high school, he's like from San Diego. He
Uh,
like threw for like he had like 6,000 like combined yards or something. He had 80 or 90 touchdowns, like with 25 of them being rushing. Um, It was like insane. It was like the third, like the second or third most in like high school history, and it's like wow.
Man, playing the All-Star. Like, yo,
I,
what in the world?
I know, right? He's playing with rookie level settings.
Sliders or
I
something.
know, yeah. But yeah, he's another big one. Also, like they have like a defensive end, Jordan Botello, who's also Korean. And it's like crazy. Like you don't see that. Like first of all, like, the fact that there's that many Asian Americans on one team, the fact that they're all like Korean American.
Yeah.
And then this coming year they're adding Tai Chan, Cambodian American, like four-star lineman, I think. Um, and they were actually gonna add this Filipino dude, CJ Williams. He like committed there, but then I think once the head coaching job switched in the offseason, he ended up committing to USC. So
Okay.
there's definitely a lot of like talent in the store, for sure, from the college level.
Yeah.
But and that's just like one example of one school. So I was still thinking about like how big that is.
No, that's amazing. So shout out to Notre Dame. I had no idea. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Um, I think though, like the it's important to note that like in the Asian American community, Asian American culture, I think the passion for football is a lot less than it is for basketball. Where it's like you're gonna see like I don't know if a bunch of dudes are like hanging out or something, like you would much more likely be seeing them like playing basketball than playing football. And a lot of that is just because like the areas they grow up in. Obviously, like I think being in California, like basketball is a lot more popular here.
Right.
And I think it like depends where you grow up. I'm sure like in Texas, in some places that can be very different. And I do you do see a lot of like Asian American talent come out of Texas. Like back in the day, I don't know if you heard of like Dat Nguyen.
No,
Um,
I'm not familiar.
he's I think he's from Houston, or something. But he played on the Cowboys. He was an All Pro linebacker.
Oh, really?
Um, and again, he's a story that no one from our community even knows really. But he was like someone who played at the highest level. He was an All American in college at Texas A&M.
Wow.
Yeah,
He's truly Texas. That is as Texas as you could get right there.
exactly. But yeah, there's some others. This is my guy. Oh yeah, quarterback at Cornell. My guy Jamison Wang. He was a freshman last year. He like won a bunch of awards. Um, there's definitely like so many to go down the list of. There's a lot of quarterbacks. I think that's a cool thing, and that's like I think that's the biggest thing when it comes to like representation. Where it's like, um, first of all, football is hard to like it's hard to first of all it's hard to like you don't see the person that much, right, compared to other sports because they're behind a whole suit, right?
All right.
But I think when you play the quarterback position, that's like the biggest, like you're in the limelight the most. So I think seeing representation in that is really important. Um, so like the fact that we're seeing that more is definitely helpful. And then in basketball, there is a bunch, especially like I think like this year there's going to be a decent amount, hopefully a few in the NBA, like with Johnny Juzang being like part Vietnamese. I think his impact, like having that March Madness run last season, like that was huge. And I think I got to talk to his brother a lot, who also like was a pro basketball player in Vietnam. Uh,
Wow.
he was like telling me like I think something that really stuck out to me was like so he like came down to surprise his brother from Vietnam, like when they made the Final Four, and that was all over like the news and stuff. And it was like he said he's like when I saw that like on the broadcast for the first time, that was the first time I ever heard Vietnam and basketball in the same sentence, like on national television. And it's
That's
like you think about
badass.
that, something so simple, right? But something that can have such a huge impact. Um,
Yeah.
so him just having success at that level, that opened up a huge door for a lot of people. Um, so seeing people like Johnny Juzang, seeing people like Remy Martin at Kansas, he's a like super proud like Filipino, and he's had a lot of success. Um, there's definitely a lot of store. I think like in the high school level, there's every year I think it's growing. On the girls side, I think you're seeing like so much more for sure, where it's like there's a lot more success for sure at the girls level than there is at the guys level. Part of that has to do with like the barrier for athleticism is less, where it's like it can be, you don't have to be the biggest, you can be the most skilled. I think
Right.
um that is not always like as necessarily applicable, I mean transferable to the guy side. Um but so you see a lot of success there, especially like I said, like coming from California. I think what's interesting is like when I used to go to a lot of these private runs in California that like consisted of like the best talent from all over California, and all these players are Division I bound players, and seeing like 25 to like 40% of them being Asian American, I think that's like that opens up a lot of eyes.
Right.
I think on the guy side, like someone that is really going to be transformational from the Indian community. This guy named Ryan Agarwal. He's actually from Texas. I went out to his area. So you said you're from Dallas, right? Or
Well, I'm not from. I live in
you're in
Dallas. Yeah.
Dallas. Okay. Well, he goes to Capel High School.
Okay.
Heard that.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
20 minutes. Yeah, 20 minutes from Dallas. So I was there out in November. He's like a 3 or 4 star recruit. He had offers from like 12 different places, including like some of like I know some of the Texas schools, including Texas, I think. But he ended up committing to Stanford. So he's headed there next year. He's a 6'7" like two guard. So he's
You
got a
get
lot of
success.
potential. And he's super like lanky. So he's got a lot to like build out. But he is kind of like so the Indian committee has never had like an Indian American in the NBA. We've had like Indian Canadian with Symbol Arm. I don't know if
Right.
you heard of him. The guy who played on the Kings, 7'5". Again, one of
Yep.
the things where it's like amazing, right?
7'5". Yeah.
But um, with this dude, it's like talking to him, like even I was able to relate to his story, right? And I think, yeah, so he's obviously like he's only gonna be a freshman next year, so but you can't say like, oh, he's gonna make it to the NBA. But I think that's like he's like the first person that people have been able to attract onto their journey this early. Um, and I think a lot of people are finding like, oh, like he's giving me the inspiration to do this, and he's only a 17-year-old kid, right? So I think that's super important. Um, Apart from that, there's like a lot of people that I featured. Um, there's other Indian dude too in Canada named Ishan Sharma. He's only a sophomore. He's like 16 years old or something. He's one of the best in Canada, and he's going to be like one of the I would expect him to be like a high major Division I player soon. Um, Obviously, it is a little bit more difficult coming out of Canada than it is coming out here, because you have to be in those, luckily he's in those specific programs where it's like very catered towards like he's like at a prep school and things like that.
Gotcha.
There Another thing to note is that when it comes to Asian talent, there's a big hub of Asian talent in Canada, in Toronto, in Ontario specifically.
Mhm.
And oftentimes that's like the biggest wave. Like we've seen Ben Lee come from there, who played at Lehigh. Now he's a part of the Shanghai Sharks.
Yeah.
But there's so much definitely in the pipeline for sure. I can list so many names, but I'll probably leave out a bunch. So there's a ton.
That's amazing. So question, what has been the reaction from the public to, you showcasing athletes?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing where it's like the goal of this is to like shock people until it's not shocking anymore. And I
Yeah.
think that's the cool thing. It's like every video I post, right? It's like it shocks multiple people. I mean, I think it shocks a decent amount of people, right? Where it's like, and it shocks our own community. It's like, oh wow, like there's this dude who's like that good. But it's like not just one dude, it's every time I post someone, right? So I think that's a big thing, where it's like these people are just don't have that spotlight. They just need that spotlight. They just need to like we need to show that, like I think the biggest thing is about putting more of these like Asian American faces into the mainstream, and showing that like it doesn't have to these aren't like one-off cases. I think that's the biggest thing I have to show, where it's not like oh, this dude is just like, this dude is like our only hope. Like we don't want, that's not the message I'm trying to show. I'm just trying to show like this dude is like, he's huge for a community, but there are so many other people like him. And I think that's cool. It's like seeing a lot of people like from the Asian community, not from the Asian community, that are like really like kind of being impacted by it. And being like, oh, like, wow, there's like, it can be normal to have success. So I think that's definitely big.
In your journey and your athletic journey, when would you say you were at your lowest?
Lowest in terms of what?
Maybe belief in yourself, maybe belief in, am I really up to par? Maybe this is in college. If you don't know if you're on the same level as those guys, like where'd you feel? When was that in your athletic career?
That's a good question. When is it lowest? It's hard to like pinpoint a specific moment. I definitely say like sometime in high school, like early high school, when like I always say I'm not never the most athletic, um, never the most skilled. I feel like I'm one of the most hardest workers. But there were times where it's like, even like a lot of my teammates were like, "Why are you putting so much effort into this?" I think a lot of my friends were like, "Why are you putting so much effort into this?" It's like there's nothing that's gonna come out of it. Um, like you're not gonna play anything higher than this. You might not even like play varsity, right? A lot there's like that kind of mentality. Um, I think that like it definitely got to me a bit where it's like, damn, like what if they're saying is like actually true? But also at the same time, I think it became like a feeling point where it's like, yeah, like why not be like one of the few to like come out from this? Why not like be that inspiration that like it was hard for that I had a difficulty like finding myself. Um, so I'd say like probably sometime during early high school.
Interesting. So what would a 2022 Pranav tell, a 10th grade you? What would you tell yourself?
I say like I say like society says all these things not because it's necessarily true, but because that's the only thing they know. Um, they haven't seen anything else, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's I think it's the fault of the way that like, we operate as a society. Um, and as someone who like lives in that society, you shouldn't like fall into those same norms as well. You shouldn't fall into those same like stereotypes or like misbeliefs in yourself. And at the end of the day, like as you say, like we're all people, right? So we can all be on our we can all do whatever we set out to do, if we are put in the right positions, if we put in the right effort, if we do the right things, right? um Obviously like it's not necessarily true. It's like there's so many other obstacles there in front of you that are just literally out of your hands, whether it be in sports, whether it be in other things. But I think going into it with the mindset that it's like that is not possible is like what um will like inhibit progress for anything.
Nice. So what does 2022 look like for you?
Yeah, I think um so for me, so another thing too is I don't think I ever talked about this, where it's like, so AMAZN is not my full-time thing. I want it to be. I want it, right. So the thing is like everything I've done with AMAZN so far has been like the nonprofit mission. It's all been I've gotten nothing financially returned, and I was fine with that because I never started this with the intention of like, oh, I want to like make this into a business. It was more so I saw a need for this, and that's why I created it. So I've obviously spent like thousands of dollars investing into this, investing to the people, investing into like what I wish I had when I was growing up, while at the same time working a full-time job. Um, and like my ultimate goal is to like do what I'm doing at a local level and kind of like bring that to a national scale, and eventually like an international scale, because you can tap in so much like outside of America as well. And that's like my ultimate goal is to like have It's like I always want Amazing HQ to be more than a media outlet. I wanted to be a way of bringing about tangible change. And that tangible change being like, for example, like giving these athletes like tangible opportunities to have success, like having showcases where we're forcing these scouts, these coaches, come out to the games, give them like be forced to see them, because otherwise they wouldn't be going out to these people's games. And I think one thing that like that's like one of the biggest barriers, right? That's like the uncontrollable barrier, where it's like no matter how good you are, no matter like what you do on the court, your success, your upward mobility is limited on what these coaches, what these scouts are going to do.
The gatekeepers, essentially,
Exactly. Exactly. And I always give this example is like, as a scout, as a coach, it's such a tight knit job, right? It's such a job that's based on like, oh, like what's worked in the past. And so if you have like a three athletes, all of the same caliber, all the same attributes, right? One's Asian American, one's white, one's black. In what case would you ever choose the Asian American one, right? It's like from a logistic perspective, that would never happen. So I think that's the tough part, where it's like you just have to keep on proving that it's like, because like they've probably never seen someone like who looked like me or who looked like another Asian American athlete have success.
Right.
So why would you take that risk? Your job's at stake. Um, so I think that's like a big thing, for sure, that it's like having those opportunities that it can actually create change. And I think helping to build like a not just a digital community but a physical community of a lot of where these people can kind of like interact with each other, meet with each other, learn from each other, and be inspired by each other. I think that's like my ultimate goal with this, and like hoping to like bring that to a national level soon. That's the goal.
Great to hear. Great to hear. Well, yo, that's been amazing. I probably said amazing on this podcast probably like 1,000 times, but yo, that's been Pranav with Amazing HQ. Thank you for your time. If you got anything else to say, if you got a shout out, if you want to do whatever, please do. And please, let's stay in contact. I truly appreciate it, man.
No, I appreciate all the really, really thoughtful questions. I think it shows, I think like you've probably been through a lot in your life, so you're able to like obviously like relate to a lot of like what I understand, the importance of representation, things like that. So I can definitely see that not only through your like life experience, what you're talking about, but also the questions that you're asking. So I really appreciate kind of like all the thought that went into that. But no, I think this is a great time. I think it's a lot. It definitely helps with like introspection when I'm like forced to answer these questions. But I appreciate you for having me on.
Without a doubt. Hey, I gotta do this plug because we've been bad at this. If you've stayed this long for the podcast, please like, share, subscribe, share to a friend, do all of those things. I'm really bad at that, but thanks for the conversation, Pranav. And hey, man, yeah, that's it. Yo, it's been What's Out, Amazing HQ. Peace out.
Peace.